We've all known someone that's gotten their wealth by ill-gotten gain. But what about healthy wealth?
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. We're here in the studio this morning. 6 out of 10 Americans are not prepared for retirement. 5 out of 10 don't even care. We all know people that have gotten wealthy by robbing the poor. It happens in different societies all around the world. But what are the real opportunities for creating wealth and building wealth over time that we have available today?
Well, first of all, John, if you're one of the people that don't care, you might as well turn this podcast off, because we're only talking to the people that really want to make a difference in the world. So if you've already given up, this isn't going to help.
And Tom, you just spoke my mind, because that's exactly what I was thinking. If you're one of those 5 people that don't care, turn the podcast off. This is not for you. And so if you're still listening, we know that you do care and you want to improve your financial circumstances. You want to improve your wealth, and we can help you do that.
I'm even going to go farther than that. If you're one of the people that likes to blame others for your lack of financial acumen, turn this podcast off, because this podcast is about taking personal responsibility and doing what we can do because we live in the greatest country in the world.
That's right. So going back to your opening line, ill-gotten gains, they happen out there. Tyranny is nothing new in the world. But what type of environment has to exist in order for tyranny to really make progress?
Well, we're recording this on July 5th, the day after Independence Day, and our founding fathers had studied every type of government that ever existed on the face of the earth. They read Greek, they read Roman, they read Judeo-Christian. They studied it all the different types of governments, and they came up with a totally new idea that the people should be in power, not somebody else over the people. And that was a completely new idea. That talked about independence, that talked about freedom, that talked about personal property rights.
And it was a new idea, but they got that idea by noticing that God gave freedom to man to
Absolutely.
make decisions and to run their lives. And they went back to the scriptures and they noticed that. And all those writings that they had studied, the things that they liked from those writings were in agreement with those things in scripture. And so really this was a God-given right, but suddenly our founding fathers came together and they're noticing these things and they're writing them down and saying, hey, this is what we ought to do.
By the way, just a side note here, if you want to know more about what the Bible has to say about finances and wealth, A Biblical Guide to Personal Finance, our latest book, is going to explore that in detail for you. It comes with a study guide. It's just a very, very valuable tool if you want to know what you can do, or if you want to help others know what they can do to change their financial picture.
That's right. Going back to the idea of ill-gotten gains versus creating real wealth, in different languages in the world, that sometimes they don't even acknowledge the difference between getting money, any way that you can get it, versus earning money, creating real wealth. And I think that's a key when it comes to talking about somebody that got rich off the back of the poor versus somebody who has pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and made it, which is more of the American dream style that we hear talked about.
Yeah, that's a really good differentiation. If the language doesn't even talk about the difference between stealing, bribing, or just
earning or getting,
then there's a confusion. But the English language very clearly delineates that there's a difference between stealing, bribing, fraudulent gain, and actually earning what you get.
That's right. And so for people that are in a situation where they're wanting to build wealth, to improve their financial circumstances, there are a lot of parallels to the world of health. People that are in bad health, whether it's financial health or physical health, it might be for slightly different reasons, but those reasons have parallels, don't they?
They do, and this goes back to the Middle English word whale, W-E-A-L. We get the word wealth from that. We get the word prosperity, abundance, riches, well-being, welfare. It all's tied into that concept that, yeah, there's things that we can do. It's all connected. And so let's go over some of those things. In fact, there's 7 things that if we want to have a better and healthier financial picture or to become wealthier, these are things that we must do. Number 1 is the question that Jesus asked the person who said, "Oh, do you want to get well?" Jesus asked, "Help me. This guy's crying out, help me, help me." He says, "Do you want to get well?"
And that kind of sounds like a funny question. But I know you were in chiropractic practice for years, over 20 years, and you had people coming to your office. And it blew your mind, as it did mine when you told me this, that some people really do not want to get well. Oh, they say they do. But they don't want to do the things to get well because sometimes they enjoy the attention they get from their sickness and
or the excuse they can have, or to blame someone else.
Yeah.
Oh, if they got well, then they couldn't blame someone else that hit them in the car, accident. And so you have to want to do something different than you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Really, really deep down, you must want to do something different.
And I think our listeners right now are in that position because they're still listening. And we already told them, if you don't want to be well, if you want to blame someone else, then turn this off. So if you're still listening, that means you're either pleased with where you are right now. I mean, like pleased about, satisfied, but you want more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you realize that you could do even better. And that all comes down to the wanting that. And it also comes down to our desire.
Yeah.
You often speak of that, Tom, that desire, we were talking a little bit about words and and their importance. Well, the word desire also has an important meaning. And Tom, why don't you tell us more about that?
Well, the word desire comes from 2 words, Deo, sire. It means fathered by God. So our desires, if we have put God first in our life, are going to be things that he wants us to have and do.
And so he puts those desires in us, those desires, those wants are God-fathered. And when they are God-fathered and we nurture those desires, then we can see success.
Now, you hinted about something about satisfaction and contentment just a little bit ago, Michelle, and that's real important because there's a differentiation between those 2 words. A lot of people think they're synonyms and they're often used interchangeably, but to become sated means that you have been filled up and you're just not kind of sluggish and you're not ready to do anything else. But to be content, you can still desire something else.
Yes, and I think I even used that word wrong just a moment ago. I remember when I first heard about this differentiation, someone said, if you're a parent and you have a young child and they're just starting to toddle about and they take a step and then they fall, oh, you are delighted. You are content with their progress, but you're not satisfied with it because if they don't make progress over the next couple of months, you're going to start being concerned that they've taken one step and they fall. But if they continue in that pattern, that's all they ever do, they're not making progress and you're not going to be content with that. Now you're going to be concerned. But the natural progression is to be content, delighted with the progress your child is making. And then as they continue, you're further content. But all the time you're making progress. You're not just satisfied. Oh, one step, you're good.
And when we look at government programs and socialistic programs, they try to satisfy people's needs, but it breeds discontentment because you can never, ever give somebody everything they want.
No, you can't give somebody enough for them to be satisfied.
It's like the fisherman's wife. you've asked so much and now you have nothing. More is all she could ask for, because that's our human nature. And St. Paul, when he was in prison, stripped of all of his rights, had said that I can be content with little or much. And that's the attitude that we have to have if we want to really build wealth. Never satisfied, but always content.
Okay, so we have to want to change our financial picture in order to change. That's very similar to somebody who's not in great health and wants to change that picture. They have to make a decision that they want to change their diet, their exercise, other habits. So the next step then, if we're looking to build a better financial life, we have to build those habits. What are the good habits that we're going to replace the bad ones with?
Well, we have to learn that, we can't just spend everything we make and more. We have to learn that there are certain things that are needs and there are wants in our life, and we have to satisfy the needs and learn how to keep the part that we would just spend frivolously. And this can happen on any budget. It doesn't matter, because Americans, like you said earlier, we're in the top percentage of 97% of Americans make more than 50% of the world. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why Americans today should be limited on how they can change their budget and keep a little bit more of what they're making.
So this makes me think of Nelson Nash, who wrote Becoming Your Own Banker and talked about the infinite banking concept. And I remember listening to him every seminar he ever gave. He always said this part when he started talking about, your budget and wanting to be in a better financial position. He said, sometimes you just have to get in the corner with yourself, with a pad of paper, and you need to look at what is it that you need to do. And that can be your financial habits that we're talking about. You've got to decide, okay, what am I willing to cut? What am I willing to do differently so that I can achieve what I want to achieve? And it's personal for everybody. We've often talked about, maybe cut out your Starbucks. Well, we're not going to tell you to cut out your Starbucks. That's easy for us to say because I don't like coffee, but that might be your piece of heaven. So Starbucks might not be the thing you're cutting out. You might be trimming in another area so that you can have the financial progress you want. For everyone, it's different.
So we have a worksheet that helps you do that. That little pad of paper, we can provide the pad of paper for you if you just contact us here at 702-660-7000. And we'll provide that. It's a little worksheet that you can do to find out where your money's going to, because most people don't know because they don't keep a track of that. This is one of the habits that wealthy people do. They know where every dime is going. Every dollar, where is it going? How did it come in? And where's it going out at?
So I know our phone's going to be ringing because just the other day, one of our clients said, "Hey, I just found your podcast. I'm really excited. They're very good. I know I'm going to be calling with some questions on things." So there's one of those things. They're going to be asking us for how do we do that budget when we want that 10, 20, 70 worksheet.
That's right. So building habits, it's super important. It's not just something that you can do for a time. Otherwise, you'll end up back where you were again, because habits take some time to develop. This is going to be a process. It's not an overnight thing. And that's why it's important to start small. Because if you try to change everything all at once, you're going to get overwhelmed and disappointed by the lack of progress. So why is it so important, to start small when it comes to financial matters?
Well, it's like when we're playing pickleball. We talked about that on one of our podcasts, I think. And there's lots of things you can do to improve your game. But if the coach came in and said, okay, your swing is wrong, you're doing your backswing this, you need to step here, you need to go this, and you do it. No, they take and say, okay,
fix all that
I want you
to
work on this, on your forehand. Do this step and get your forehand down. Now, after that's accomplished and that's become a habit, now we can work on maybe your backhand or maybe your serve, or one little doable thing at a time.
Yeah.
And a good coach breaks that down, and that's what we try to do for people is to break this down, how to do this in a very simple, doable, affordable, comfortable way, because we can't come in here with a shotgun approach and hit it all at once. Mm-hmm. We have to be like the marksman with the rifle and peck off one little thing at a time.
That's great.
And what might be a small step for me or you will be a different small step for somebody
Yes.
else. Because, if somebody has never played pickleball, but they've played tennis and they've played, all kinds of sports, and they come in, what they're going to be able to handle as small steps is going to be different than someone who has never played any sport, never even seen, a tennis ball or a tennis court or a tennis racket. If they, completely unaware, that's going to be a different kind of small step than the athlete.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Nelson Nash, and he's the grandfather of this whole concept that we're teaching, and he always said this. He saw that people that failed doing this, they started too big and tried to go too fast. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Real wealth has to be developed, and you have to build layers of the foundation. You have to build from the bottom up. And if you get it out of order or you try to rush it, then you get things in the wrong spot, and it makes your wealth unstable and at risk of market conditions or many other things that could destroy it.
And it's not just a money issue.
No.
Some of it is our thinking.
A moral issue, too.
Yeah, and our thinking of how we have to change our way of thinking and understanding so that we can implement these things.
I was just talking to a couple the other day, and one of them is a tobacco user, and they're really trying to stop, and the spouse is saying, look, we've added it up. It would be $4,000 a year that we could save if you could just give up your nicotine habit. Well, that's one little thing. If that's where he could start in that relationship, that's a huge savings for them. For other people, it might be something else, okay? But again, going back to the needs and the wants, that's where a good place is to start.
Yeah, and one person's small step might be a big step for somebody else, and so you can't. This is not really a comparative thing. You have to take a small step based on your situation where you are right now.
And that brings up the next step. We've got to be specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, John. Didn't mean to cut you off there.
So yeah, it's important to be specific with those small steps, because if you just throw out a bunch of small steps out there, it doesn't really matter if you get it done in 3 months, or it doesn't matter if you get it done in a year, 2 years. If there's no timeline on it, it doesn't have a sense of urgency. And so being specific with what you want to accomplish helps to narrow that down, and it's also important to set some dates to create a sense of urgency. You may not hit all of those dates all the time. You don't have to feel like you were a failure if you don't, because having that sense of urgency will help you to accomplish more than if you're not specific in that regard.
So true.
And you kind of want to stretch yourself too. The old saying,
Sure.
shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon if you miss.
Yeah.
Is really true. Be bold in what you think you're going to accomplish, and don't get discouraged because you got off the ground. But because if you never shot, you would have never got off the ground.
Yeah.
And that brings the next step. And this is where we see a lot of people fail, is they don't keep records. They don't know what's going on. I remember
you got to record your progress.
Yeah, you got to record what you're doing. I remember a patient years ago came in, and they were having lots and lots of pain. And one of the things in their intake form is they were taking over a bottle of Tylenol every month.
Ouch.
And after a few weeks of care, we did a review and we found out, and they didn't really notice any difference in their pain patterns, which is not uncommon. But then as we reviewed, she became aware that she wasn't taking Tylenol anymore. So now she was able to function without all that Tylenol, that toxin going into her body, and she was still functioning at a level when she had to take it all. So that's improvement.
Yeah.
If we hadn't kept records, we would have never noted the progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and recording progress when it comes to your finances can be as simple as doing your 10-20-70 evaluation. And that's the system that we use for evaluating cash flow, for those of you not familiar with that. But doing that evaluation, whether it's every few months that you need to do it, Some people need to do it every month. And if they're trying to change a pattern, they have to have that monthly sense of accountability. But over time, maybe as you develop those habits, maybe you don't have to revisit that every single month. So for some people, it might be revisiting that once a year to see if they're on track. It might be revisiting their goals on a regular basis, and at least noting that down. It is important to record your progress in one way or another.
And then our sixth step that's so important is you need to reward yourself for your progress. You need to have some type of enjoyment that you get, not just from recording it and saying, oh, I made this benchmark, but what can I do to kind of celebrate? Because we're humans and we like to know that we've achieved something. And oftentimes that's best realized by celebrating. People that go on a diet and they lose a certain amount of weight, maybe they go out for an ice cream cone. Okay, financially, maybe you've been able to, get out of out of a credit card. Well, maybe that calls for, going on a little date night or going for a little mini vacation for the day, or taking a little hike in the woods, or whatever it is that you do that rewards yourself.
And I noticed you didn't say, maybe you're getting out of credit card debt, so you book a trip to Hawaii to celebrate, because, and maybe that's something you can do if you're far enough along, but you do have to be careful that the reward doesn't negate everything you've done.
And something when it comes to rewards too, people talk about a system of accountability. Oftentimes they will involve another person. In that sense of accountability. Makes perfect sense for spouses that are working on financial goals together. But sometimes bringing in another person on accountability can be harmful too, depending on the environment that it's done in. Sometimes it's more like sharing with somebody that doesn't need to know, or that you're getting more attention when the results are negative than if the results are positive. So you have to be careful about bringing in an outside source of accountability. Sometimes a source of accountability is being accountable to yourself or to God. Whether you track that on a piece of paper, on a spreadsheet, whatever it is. So think twice before you spill your problems to somebody else out that is not associated with them.
Many times when, let's say, a couple comes for some outside advice and they want us to be in that accountable role to keep them accountable, many times, and not all the time, but many times, each one is blaming the other one. And that goes back to the very first thing we said at the beginning of this podcast. If you're going to blame someone else for your problems, this isn't for you. This is people that want to move forward and overcome their lack of good money management and the ability to be in a better financial position. So, if you're using a third-party person to keep you accountable, it's not a blame game there. We're not blaming the other one for what the problem is.
And it's not a time to get attention for your failings or whatnot. It's just to keep you accountable.
Yeah. Yes, but it could also be a very positive thing.
It can be.
When you say, hey, look what I've done, and they rejoice with you. Yeah. And, sometimes when we look at our finances, sometimes it's hard to see what is obvious to someone else when they come alongside and see. So I think,
true. Yeah.
A lot of our clients like that when they say, hey, I've got this going on. What should I do? And maybe they're right on track. Or maybe we say something that just kind of gives them a new idea. And then they even say, well, why didn't I think of that? Well, they were close. Sometimes you were too close to the forest to see the trees.
And of course, we're just talking from experience of what we've seen, because we've seen all of this. We've seen people that just want to blame the other spouse. We've seen people that, I'm in this by myself. My spouse doesn't do anything. And then we've seen people that say, no, we're coming together. We want to do this and pull together as a team. So,
and we've seen people that want accountability, but only for the attention that the accountability gets. That's not necessarily the accountability that they need. It's a different mindset.
So this goes back into it. Do you want to get well?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to get wealthier? So these things are building on each other. That's why we put them in this order. And finally, the seventh one. Once you've accomplished the small things, you need to add more small things to that, because this isn't a game of satisfaction. This is a game of being content and always pushing ourselves to the next level. Because, and I base this, on the story that Jesus talked about of the talents. They multiplied what they had, and then he even says, to him who has, give him more. Mm-hmm. And take away from the person that didn't do anything, because they're going to be taken away from whatever they do have because they didn't manage it well. Mm-hmm. And so to him who has, gets more if they've done it correctly.
So can we go through and just sum up those 7 things? Because I know there's some people out there who want to take notes. And so can we sum up those 7 things?
Yeah, so you have to want to improve.
That's number 1.
Yeah, if it's in health, you have to want to get well. You need to build habits for success.
Okay, so that number 2 is building the habits for success. So number 1, you want to have success. Number 2, you want to build habits for success.
Start small.
Start small.
You have
Number
to start
3.
small. You can't start gigantically if you don't have the skills. And this goes back to, the story of Jesus talking about putting a new wine in an old wineskin. It'll destroy them both. You've got to start where you're at with a small little thing so that you can grow into something different that will be able to manage and control the wealth that you're going to build. You got to start small.
Number 4, you've got to be specific. You've got to have it very clear what you're going to do so that you can accomplish it and feel good about that before you go on to tackle other things.
Number 5, you got to record your progress. Number 6, you have to reward yourself for your progress. And number 7, you have to add to those small accomplishments to achieve your better results.
So that is one of the reasons that we really like dividend-paying whole life insurance. It can be geared around what is comfortable and affordable for you. It's guaranteed, so it's going to be there for you, whatever you set aside, and it's going to grow, and it's going to also allow you to access that to help you achieve your other goals and accomplishments. It starts where it's affordable and comfortable and doable for you. We don't have to start huge. In fact, those who try to start huge often lose because they're trying to go too fast, too quick, with too much, just like Nelson Nash said. And so, and the other thing is that it's a mutually regulated place to keep money. So we're not subject to a lot of the tyranny that, such as taxes and things like that, or the inflation that our government puts us on. We shield ourselves from that and allow it.
It's an insulator. Yeah,
We're
still in the environment, and yet it gives us a tool to help insulate ourselves against the effects of some of those things. Yeah.
So something that's coming to my mind too when we talk about whether we're talking about health or wealth or anything in our lives, and then also as we talk about, well, how can we plan for the future? Or how can we plan for retirement? Or how can we accomplish something in the future? It all comes back to that saying that I've heard that people overestimate what can be accomplished in a year. And they underestimate what can be accomplished in the next 15 minutes. So oftentimes we think about, oh yeah, I'll be able to do this and that and the other thing, but they forget of, oh, I should take this action immediately. I have 15 minutes, I can do this, that, and the other thing. And, sometimes we think, oh, we're going to clean the garage on Saturday. And, we make this huge thing and it's out there. And then, Saturday comes and we may or may not get to it. But we forget that, oh, I've got 15 minutes, I could put this, and this away.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what it takes, even in our financial lives, that we have to look at, okay, what's this little thing that I can do right now?
The small step.
I was thinking the other day about one of our past neighbors who was very, very disorganized. The house was always really in a clutter, so much so that it was like a path getting through their home. And they were always talking about reorganizing. Oh, it's time to reorganize. Reorganize what? Sometimes we've got to throw some things out in order to declutter so that we can bring something else in. And if you're unhappy with where you're at financially, it might be time to really sit down in that corner, like Michelle was talking about, Nelson Nash saying, getting that worksheet that you can get from us, the 10-20-70 worksheet, and just sitting down and finding out where your money is going to. What is the clutter in your life that's destroying your wealth?
Yeah, it's kind of like somebody that needs to go on a diet. If they're eating all sorts of junk food right now and they're not going to cut out the junk food, but try to add healthy things to it, that's not really going to help them. They've got to cut out the junk food in order to be able to add the healthy things, because there's only so much that you can reasonably eat and be healthy.
One of my best friends in college, he was overweight the entire time I knew him, but he got up in his later life and he was 600 and some pounds.
Wow.
And I remember when he came to visit us, and he went home and he called us like 6 months later, and he said, "Tom, I just wanted to let you know, being in your home, I realized I didn't need to eat to solve every one of my problems." And he had already dumped like 50, 60 pounds, I can't remember exactly which, just in a 6-month time, just by slowing down on the clutter of food in his life.
Oh, and people run into that financially too. Sometimes they try to solve their problems by going shopping. Sometimes they try to solve their problems by, I'll make an investment. That'll make up for some other things. Or I'll invest in this, or I'll buy this financial product. And they really don't necessarily know what they're doing. They're just trying to buy something. And sometimes it just becomes a bunch of clutter and adds to their problem. And so, we got to cut things out and figure out what is going to solve this problem, which isn't a problem. This problem of wanting to do better, that's not a problem. It's the things and the stuff around it that's causing the problem.
Yeah. Well, wanting to buy things to solve problems in our financial life is kind of like somebody who has a poor health problem due to excessive drinking alcohol, because people, when we buy things, we get an emotional high off of that. It's kind of like a high that people get when they drink alcohol. And so it can be addicting if we're not careful and we don't have a balance in that aspect.
And it doesn't have to just be, alcohol. It could be, these foodies that just get a high of going to the next expensive restaurant.
Right.
Or taking
buying
the next
things, going shopping.
Taking
it
the next
doesn't have to be
trip to someplace that really's not necessary.
Yeah.
Not that any of those things are evil in themselves, but when they're to the excess, it drains you.
Yeah.
And then they try to make it up by taking a high risk investment or something. And a high risk can be completely different for different people too, because a high risk for somebody might be, that's nothing to someone else because of the way they've already managed their resources. So we just have to be really, really on track to say, okay, what do I want out of life? What is my goal? Do I really want to get wealthy, or do I really want to be healthy? Do I really want to get well?
Yeah,
and build on that.
And the importance of setting things that are specific, goals that are attainable, is because so many people, they see life through the lens of social media. They see the best of what's happening to everybody else, and it promotes speculation without a specific path on how to get there, if there's something that you want in life. And so in order to have things you want in life, you have to be specific. What is it that you want? And be specific on what are the small steps that you can take to get closer there? Because otherwise it's just a bunch of speculation, and that hope that's way out there, someday, something in the future, sets you up for disappointment.
And of course, you have to start. I remember the story Mr. Ziegler always talked about when he talked about losing weight. He figured it out, how much he would have to lose every day and every month. And he said it was so easy, I didn't even get started for 30 days. Okay? We got to start.
Yeah. I think Walt Disney said it, the way to get things done is to stop talking and start doing.
Very good. And so with that, I guess we should stop talking right now. About time to end this podcast.
One more thing. Henry Ford said, don't confuse motion with progress.
Yep, that's true too.
We've got to make sure that the motions and the actions that we're going through are accomplishing something, and that's why we record our progress or our lack of it.
That's right. So, 2 books for today. You heard my dad mention A Biblical Guide to Personal Finance. That's going to help you take the lessons from the Bible and apply them in your finances. And taking the small steps that you need to achieve your financial goals, that goes back to your book, Winning Your Financial Game, where you take down these financial principles that are important to a healthy financial life, and you break them down into 21 steps. There's I think 21 chapters in there. I think there's 20 steps. You break those down and you apply those in your life. That's going to help you to achieve your financial goals. So you can get both of those books using the resource links in the podcast show today, or you can call our office at 702-660-7000. You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. Have a wonderful week.